We are back. We're back for Series 7 with a little bit of a shorter series this time around, but we are starting off with an absolute goldmine of an episode as we interview Richard Coekin, who works with Reach Ministries.
Absolutely. And before we get stuck into that, we want to shout out to Stewardship, who are sponsoring this series. We're so happy to have them, and you'll hear more about them later. So let's get into it with episode 61 of Gourds and Pomegranates.
Welcome to the Gourds and Pomegranates podcast, talking common sense for church communications. Here's Hannah and Joe.
So we are so pleased to have Richard with us today. Richard, how are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Good. You have got some excellent quickfire questions to start us off and just get to know you a little bit better for the listener. So why don't you go ahead and tell us your favourite biscuit?
This is the only one I rehearsed for, so I think it's Garibaldi or fig rolls or some of those kind of icing-covered biscuits you always get at church. But
Never seen
Garibaldi's, they're champion.
No one's ever bought them apart from church workers.
Well, that's probably true, yeah.
And do you use social media much at all? Do you have like a favourite social platform?
What social media? I've heard of it. And, no, I decided a couple of years ago. I tried summarising sermons in 144 characters for a while, but which was interesting. And then I blocked Twitter X or whatever it is. And not much, I'm afraid.
No. And it's interesting. There does tend to be like more of a trend these days towards people just using a lot less social media.
Yeah.
Even if we still use it on behalf of churches. Yeah. Are you a podcast listener? Are there any that you tune into regularly?
The one I absolutely love is The Rest is History. And an avid fan. In fact, it makes long journeys kind of worthwhile because you're getting, 5 done on Hannibal or 3 done on, Trafalgar or 11 or something on Custer. So, I love The Rest is History. It's really good.
Digging in a bit deeper into it. And speaking of really deep questions, the last one we have is gourd or pomegranates?
Yeah, I think pomegranates really. I mean, gourds, they sound a bit sort of, dry and weird. Pomegranate's great on a salad, so I think pomegranates.
Yeah, for sure. The clear winner. Yes. So do you want to start us off by telling us just a little bit about your your church background, your career, however you want to describe it? Like what's brought you to this point of life?
Well, obviously I'm a sinner saved by grace. I was brought up in a Christian family, terrific Christian parents, took us out to Nigeria for a few years and then took us to North Queensland in Australia. So I grew up, did quite a lot of schooling abroad, I guess. Came back to Kingston for sixth form. I remember my mum explaining the gospel to me as a 6-year-old. I actually was on Polzaf Beach on a family holiday watching the beach mission thing. And they did the Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe sketch and said, do you want to write a letter to Jesus? And I said, Mum's asked me, and I said, no, I want to think about it. So I went home, but I remember asking.
Pensive 6-year-old.
Yeah. So, so raised in a great Christian family. And then came to this country, school, sixth form. Then went off to study law at Cambridge, and then I practiced law for about 4 years? 4 years in central London. But all the time I was going to summer camps, Cypher camps, and they were the highlight. I did 2 back-to-back camps in the summer. But I also met my dear wife Sian there. So she's a Welsh doctor and a wonderful person. When people meet her, they always like me. So otherwise, I think they can't. Anyway, better half, married up, all that stuff. But when I was about 28, I took a year in Moore College in Sydney, where I learned a huge amount. I was allowed to design this incredible study program where I did all the biblical theology for year 1, 2, and 3, and the doctrine for years 1, 2, and 3. But no exams. And private tuitions with Broughton Knox, which was a great privilege. So then I came back, did 3 years at Wycliffe Hall in Oxford, trained as an Anglican vicar. I actually didn't meet a free church pastor for 10 years, so I didn't really know anything about the independent church. So then I did a 4-year curacy at St Mary's Cheadle in Manchester, had a fantastic time there. It's wonderful to be in a place where nobody cares about London, ever wants to go to London. If you ever lived in London, they can't understand why you wouldn't want to leave. just a sort of sense of local community. And met with the Worldwide Message Tribe. So they were Andy Hawthorne, based at our church.
Oh wow!
And they were an influence on me. I just thought, seeing passionate, convictional evangelism like that. So I love those guys. And then after 4 years at St Mary's, which was a conservative evangelical church, came a new church plant in South London called Dundonald Church. So called because it was in Dundonald School on Dundonald Road by Dundonald Park. So they called it Dundonald Church. And that was a church of 35 adults and a few children. And that was 1995. And so we came down then as a family, and God grew the work. I mean, for the first 8 years, my office was the garden shed, and we didn't have a pound or a brick from the diocese.
Well, I mean, I know that there's a few more bricks involved now, having visited Dundonald recently for the Reach conference. So tell us a little bit about the journey of that church from your garden shed.
Well, God grew the church, and obviously it's a team game, and He brought lots of wonderful assistant pastors to work with me and ministry trainees. So that little church, which was tiny. I remember us meeting in a garden in the first summer because the school had forgotten to tell us they were painting the inside of the hall.
Right, yeah.
So, and I think God grew the church about 40 adults a year, probably on average.
Okay.
I think it was a quarter through non-Christians becoming Christians, a quarter through lapsed Christians locally coming to us, a quarter who heard about the plant and came from elsewhere, and a quarter immigrant communities. So initially there was a big influx of South Africans and Afrikaners. In fact, we started an Afrikaans congregation from a Bible study at one point.
Wow.
But then also South Koreans came because of the Samsung work in New Malden. So there's a big community of South Koreans in New Malden. And then, of course, the influx across London, East Europeans and so on. So at the time, we were very much a small, middle-class, white majority little church. But now it's very different. So we went multi-site for a few years. So we had a second morning congregation in the school and then planted that out. Firstly into a wine bar for a year. That was fun, throwing up the needles, and then into a local community centre, then into the David Lloyd Sports Centre. And then we had an evening congregation at the parish church of St Andrews. And then we had an Afrikaans congregation in the local independent church. But then in 2000, I was invited by St Helens Bishopsgate to recruit from their evening congregation to Plant West. So William Taylor and I had chatted at a conference in Australia and talked about how it would be good to have something in West London. And so the idea was to build something around the political world, as St Helens had been built around the financial centre. And so we very kindly, they let me and Matt Fuller, who was my ministry trainee at the time. It's worth saying the ministry trainees brought masses of energy. The whole work really was built on ministry trainees, full of energy and courage. And so through Dundonald, there were dozens of them that came through. Lots of them, most of them from within the church. We didn't have a student work, so we weren't pulling in. We would take Cornhill rejects and people from within the congregation. It was just a lesson in looking harder at who God has given you and investing in them.
And I'm just, it feels like that could be a complete podcast episode of itself. Not to mention, I mean, trying to get some insights on your years of practicing law, or even Sean's time as a doctor, and the impact that has on church leadership as well. Yes. But thinking about church growth in general, that's something that you're always going to be concerned with as a minister, with a growing church. But it's now something that you somewhat specialise in with Reach, right? Do you want to tell us a little bit more about how that came about?
Well, I think, again, by God's grace entirely and only, God grew the church. So we started planting churches so I planted in West London, in Christchurch, Mayfair, and I was senior pastor there at the same time as being senior pastor at Dundonald, which seemed easy at the time. You just do the same programme that I did on a Wednesday at Dundonald with all the leadership training and everything. I did that on a Thursday at
Yeah.
Lunchtime. We took over a couple of lunchtime ministries. I started one called Westminster at 1, and we took over Mayfair at 1. And we just repeated everything for Dundonald. And just God gave growth. There was energy and, in one sense, very ordinary work. At Dundonald School, it was just investing in the community. So my kids came through the primary school. I started a rugby club there called the Dundonald Rhinos, and we did morning assemblies and Christmas things and lots of local parties on Saturday evenings. I mean, it's Wimbledon, so it's quite sort of drinks party-ish, and we just got to know people. And then people brought friends, and we tried everything. We did shows in the Polka Theatre that didn't really work, but from them came Christianity Explored Group. Lots of people became Christians through that. So, and so the ministry trainees grew, and there were 9 church plants from Dundonald over the years, but also then planting from Christchurch Mayfair. And so that in 2005 we formed the Co-Mission Network. So I think over the years, so that's now about 30-something churches. So it's been all over the place in one sense, but God raised up wonderful leaders. The Commission senior pastors are a terrific bunch of men with terrific teams. And so God did grow the work. And I think what happened was, during all that time, I was watching God do that and learning how God grows different kinds of churches. So Commission's got churches in housing estates, in the suburbs, a couple of smart city centre churches like Globe, Christchurch Mayfair, St Peter's Fulham, St Michael's Fulwell. So some are Anglican, some are Free Church, a whole mix of different churches. And I think I didn't realise at the time, but that growing experience of how God works in different ways, different churches, and also getting to travel a bit. My links with Australia meant that I was connected with the St Matthias Network and the Aussie guys, the City Diocese people, and so began to travel around with lots of people who, committed to church, healthy, prayerful, Bible teaching centred gospel church growth.
But that's such like that network and knowing those people from so many different contexts, and even the variety like within 30 churches of Co-Mission itself, like that that experience is so valuable, right? Because church will look so different depending on the context that we're in.
Yes, and I think the other thing is I'm old now. I'm 64. So I'm what they I was in Nairobi recently, and they sort of respectfully call me Mzee, which just means old man, and rather nice, really. I quite like being Mzee. Kenya seems to have a different sort of feel, and here it's thanks old man, leave it to us now. But in there,
or you start getting titles like Pastor Emeritus, which I had to look up what that meant.
Yes, well, it's deliberately opaque. So I think for a kind friend said to me about 6 years ago, what would you like to do to finish well? And I chatted John Stevens and Trevor Archer, and we had a lunch and just talked about how could I best serve in the later years of my ministry. So the idea is to do a bit of what Ray Evans has been doing with the FIC. So he and I both share a passion for helping churches with the practical business of running church. How do you do your job? I've made plenty of mistakes, seen plenty of things go wrong, as well as lots of things that God has blessed and have grown. And I just think it's a very rewarding thing as an older man to encourage younger pastors. And so, it came time for me to start a new ministry with Reach, and I'm absolutely loving it. A year in, it is so rewarding helping people across the country who are good people, doing their best. Most of them are pastors with wives and families behind the scenes. They're all terrific, and lots of them are facing, obstacles and growth. Most of them have got growing churches. I think it's almost the definition of a good leader that you're willing to take advice and look for mentoring of some kind. So I think they're all early adopters. I think the best leaders are not first adopters. You let somebody else crash and burn. You don't want to wait to be an early adopter, I think, is the mark of a good leader. I just find it very, very rewarding. And so in one sense, I've been doing something locally with Dundonald, and then something regionally with Commission. And now, just because I'm old and know people everywhere, I get to do something nationally and get to travel a bit as well, which is wonderful.
Nice.
Fantastic. Could you describe Reach in one sentence, sort of as a vision statement?
I think our strapline is encouraging pastors and their teams in godly and effective gospel ministries. And the USP there is effective. That is, I think lots of conferences and ministries are rightly concerned for the biblical principles and the concepts behind healthy ministry. But I think we noticed there was a gap in how to actually do the job. So I think two things are happening. First, a lot of our training is front-loaded. So you start with ministry traineeship. You might do a couple of years at Cornhill, or you might do residential at Oak Hill or Crosslands or something, but generally at the beginning of your ministries. But then 10, 15 years in, the questions you're asking are completely different to what they were at Bible college. You're not really asking about how do I execute Deuteronomy, though that remains a challenge, but you're really asking about all the practicalities of running a church, and especially where there's growth and scale and multiplication. In general, a lot of the training ministries train you for being a pastor of a small church. There's very little for how do you deal with the change. Remember Tim Keller's famous article on the different dynamics, different sized churches. I also think there's a gap. If you want Bible handling help, then you'd go to Cornhill. If you want theology, you might go to Crosslands or Union or Oak Hill or the Catalyst Conference. If you want soul health, you'll go to Living Leadership. And they're all brilliant ministries. But where do you go for practical help in how to do your job? And so we sort of talked to lots of leaders. They all recognise there is a gap there. And so what we're trying to do is provide help for pastors and their teams in how to actually do their jobs. Now, that is we don't want to forget the godly side of that. That is, we start with the Bible, we look at the principles, but then we talk about what's working in the UK. I mean, we often, pull in US, American, they're great conference speakers, and the ones that we've had across for commission, they're all famous names, and they're terrific people, terrific families. I'm saying guys from another country, they're always worth listening to, but they don't do our job. And when you go to a conference, you're trying to sort of pick out a principle here. As you get older, you're trying to pick out something here and there, but it's never bespoke for you and your church. So what we're trying to do is 4 things. We're providing consultancy, that is kind of mentoring. So that is conversations, one-on-one, with myself or Ray Evans, or there's 6 of us now who are mentors, just to talk about your ministry in your church. So it's all focused on your issues, and lots of those things have to do with strategy and growth. Some of it's self-management, but it's driven by the pastor themselves. And then there are church assessments. That's where you do a deep dive. It'll probably take 3 months, where we produce, we visit, do lots of stats, comparative analysis, and you get a document at the end, 50 pages. Ray Evans said he'd never seen anything like it. And Andy Harker, who works with me and Lizzie and Sarah on the Reach team, he is brilliant at this and produces just an epic report at the end, which is a sort of, SWOT analysis of the church, strengths and weaknesses, how can we work at the weaknesses and play to the strengths kind of thing. And we've done a few of those. They're very much appreciated. We've got a few more in the pipeline. Then there are regional clinics. So the idea is all begins with C's, you see. So it's consultancy, church assessment, clinics, and conference. The clinics are sort of like regional network. So often with presentation, 1 or 2 presentations, and then sometimes with a sort of Q&A clinic feel where you bring your own questions. It's terrific because then at least you're dealing with the specific issues of 10 churches or 20 churches, whereas in a conference you're speaking to hundreds. But then the Reach conference, sounds like you came to, Joe. I mean, God has grown that. We were 150 for the first one and 230 last year. So there's a bit of momentum there.
Brilliant.
We're still the new kids on the block, but the feedback's been really positive.
And it is very practical.
What did you make of it?
It feels very UK focused for a start, rather than it being like we're going to hit everyone. And that's what we love. That's the aim of this podcast as well. The 2 takeaways: it's people in similar situations, and I say that's speakers as well as delegates. But it was a mix. It wasn't just one type of church that everyone looks the same there, and that can be the case at some of these conferences. There was people from all sorts of different denominations, but keeping the main thing, and yet sharing across all of that. So despite all of the seminars and all of that, the main highlight of the day for us as a church team going there was the conversations that happened over lunch, sitting down with people from different churches and saying, we're working through this at the moment. We know you guys are ahead of us on that. Can we learn from you? So
I agree with that.
Practical core.
One of the things we said is that we're not very strongly agenda driven, and we do have an agenda. It's probably an Acts 6 agenda. I'll say more about that in a moment, but we want to provide a platform for church leaders to learn from church leaders. So, all the speakers are pastors and leaders of some kind. I thought the TED Talk format worked really well. We had people who are not necessarily pastors as well as some pastors speaking, and they were just epic. It's amazing how much value somebody who's prepared a 12-minute talk can give.
Yeah, and it's a chance to hear from more people as well, isn't it? That you can cram more people in, and so one that really stuck out was the language classes, the free English classes. It's amazing the amount of people they're reaching is oversubscribed, and yet you probably wouldn't find that on most conference agendas or as a 45-minute hour keynote.
I say it's an Act 6 agenda because I think we clarified that this year because. Of course, we've got a sort of an older sister ministry across in Australia, which is called Reach Australia. They're a long way ahead of us. One of the things they get criticised for is, are they too businessy? I don't think they are, but there is always that danger that you become all about structure and forget the word. So I think Acts 6 for us is very helpful because it's basically saying, the apostles, when they dealt with their issues of, obviously there was persecution, then corruption, there's distraction of the pastors from teaching. They don't close down the food ministries. They want to maintain the love for, especially across ethnic boundaries within the church. It's a huge church. They can't do it all. It was their responsibility, and now they have to delegate it. So 3 things happened in Jerusalem through the decision to delegate and build teams. Firstly, the pastors were able to focus on Bible teaching, because secondly, they if you like, released the power of the congregation. They appointed teams and recruited leaders into ministry teams and delegated and empowered and authorized them to do the ministry so that, thirdly, the hungry were fed. And so this was a loving church as well as a well-taught church, a thoroughly involved church and a loving church, and so the word of God spread. I mean, the aim is for the gospel to spread, to reach the lost. That's what we want to see happen. That's why we're called Reach. So we're not just about how to build teams. We are about enabling word ministries by building teams. Yeah. And I just think that balance is important. That platform then to get people who are doing the job to learn from them best practice from one another. But the agenda is also I think our agenda is to say, look, let's be more outcome driven. The Bible cares about outcomes, not just faithful incomes. We want to be fruitful as well as faithful. It cares about that, records outcomes, encourages it. It's interesting, in that passage where people push back and say, yes, but it's God who gives the growth. That's true. But, Paul planted and Apollos watered.
Yeah.
And through that, God gave the growth. You've got to plant and water. You can't it's not just God gave the growth and we just did nothing. So I think we do want to say that as leaders, we can be bottlenecks. We can be the problem. We are responsible. We need to take responsibility for doing the best we can. And that includes building and enabling, empowering teams to do the things that we shouldn't be doing and which they can do better than we can.
Yeah. Yeah, and that idea of teams, I'm glad we've covered it because it's something that we've mentioned a few times. As I've mentioned before, it's something that our church is getting towards launching, and it's something which is so key to being able to do more, not just for the sake of more, for the sake of reaching others. Yes. But avoiding those bottlenecks. And also that thing of the best practice and learning from others. I mean, when we focus on communications, we have to look at the results because that's how you inform a lot of what you're going to do more. But we're very conscious of this podcast right from the beginning of it. We're not saying we're the experts, just listen to us. We're trying to point to all sorts of other people, all sorts of other resources that are out there and say, these guys are doing great, look at them. So that's always been really interesting.
That's a good thing I think one of the sort of commitments at the beginning was in the past we have all been a bit tribal, and while we want to keep to our convictions, there are different tribes that share the same convictions. So, whether independent, Anglican, New Frontiers, there are lots of people at conference with different church polities, but the same gospel. And I do think we want to learn from one another. We're tired of belittling one another. So I think we want to speak generously of each other. And I'm not just trying to be, woke there. I think it's a Christian thing to speak well of those who are faithful, even when they're not from our tribe. And I think we're trying to model that at the conference. And it's a nice atmosphere to be in.
This episode is sponsored by Stewardship, a Christian charity that helps Christians be the best stewards of the resources God gives them. For churches and charities, this means helping them grow what really matters.
Whether you're planning a new building, need fundraising support, or help with your payrolls or accounts, Stewardship is there to help you grow with wisdom and purpose. Loans, fundraising, and sound governance, they're not flashy bits of ministry, but they are the bits that help it thrive.
So if you're growing something good, grow it well. Head to stewardship.org.uk to find out more. So how churches communicate with the world around them is obviously a key part of how new people come across a church, or maybe even experience it for the first time. We've heard the phrase that these days the front door to the church is in people's pockets, thinking of live streaming and things like that on their phone. What do you think churches are getting really right or wrong in this area of sort of seeking to use tech and these other sort of communication things to get the word out and reach people?
Yes, in one sense, I'm not an expert, and that's part of the role of a pastor, to be an expert. There are plenty of people at Dundonald who are experts in that kind of thing, and I had little to do with that other than encouraging, and we need to recognise it. And of course, pastors need to recognise the importance of comms. And we just appointed a comms and events worker at Reach, and churches, need to recognise this in their operational team. And obviously, money is an issue. When you're small, you may not be able to do it all. But even just to talk about the category of comms, one of the things we've despaired of, and I feel a passion for really across the country, is we've had a right emphasis upon expounding the Bible well, and we can keep working at that. That task never stops. But across the country, there are sort of very small churches where a pastor is preaching a decent sermon to tiny groups of people because the website is terrible, the building is awful, there's no money, there's no organisation, no one's got any confidence to bring anyone. And sometimes the reason is because the comms is poor. So even if you can't do it as the pastor, to try and look for somebody within the congregation who could have a go and help, and indeed to go to ministries that can help you, whether that's come to Reach Ministries or, go to church office. So Gavin Smith, those guys.
Yeah. Gavin's been on the podcast before. Yes,
of course. And Joe McKee at CPAS and so on. They're all running great ministries for practical things. You've got to start somewhere. When Dundonald was small, we didn't have anything. But you do your best with what's in front of you. But just recognising that, is there anybody who could do our website for us? Or, let's anybody who'd like to give money, pay for somebody to do the website for us. Because you're right that at Dundonald we were increasingly finding people who watched, more than one service online before they turned up. And they're checking you out. If they don't sort of travel to come to you, or even come out the front door and across the street. They'll check you out online first. So obviously the live streaming, in COVID, in one sense, for all it's the tragedy of it, the blessing that God brought to us was to get us online. We're all doing podcasts soon, so we're looking to launch our sort of Reach podcast towards the end of the year. See how we get on with that. I'm looking at you all thinking, gee, you're good. Your voice is amazing. So Hannah, you have to tell us what to do. We don't know how to do this.
Oh, it's Joe that does it all. I just turn up and chat to people.
Well, that's what I want. I want that role.
Yeah.
So obviously, what website, sound systems in church.
Yeah.
You can live in a shabby chic building, but if nobody can hear you teach the word, they're not going to grow. So you it is worth investing in your sound system. And look, obviously, I recognise at different stages you can't afford these things, but just to recognise these things matter. I think sometimes in planted churches or in revitalisations, there are lots of things you can't afford to fix. You can't fix the roof. You can't fix. Sometimes you have to. I realise that, but there are some things that are just aesthetic that you don't need to fix. But you can make up for that by investing in high quality things that matter. So things like coffee. You could, if you invest in a nice coffee machine, so you actually got great coffee. Because nobody minds the fact the paint is peeling off the walls. Nobody cares. You communicate that your love and your care for people through the excellence of what you're trying to do at a communication level. And especially these days when people are very experienced screen watchers and very experienced in discerning the quality of what they're looking at, imagery. And, my generation, we pack every space with, multiple information, too many words, clearing that out and putting in a QR code. There's likely to be somebody in the church who can do that for you. And you do communicate care and therefore how you care about outsiders. I think one of the things that needs to change is that people sometimes separate evangelism from church as if they're two separate things. They're not. In 1 Timothy, where you've got the church as the pillar and foundation of the truth, people think that makes you a battleship. You're here to sort of fight as a warrior against everybody who's false. But in fact, he's just said earlier in chapter 2 that God is a saviour who wants all people to come to the knowledge of the truth. So church is for reaching the lost. And, God has delayed the end of the world for us to get on with it. So I think to pay attention to outsider-friendly comms matters hugely. That also comes down, of course, to what you're doing within the services, how you speak about guests and outsiders with kindness and respect. Because if you speak in a way that feels safe for your Christians to invite their friends, then they might invite their friends. If you're regularly dropping clangers and insulting non-Christians in church, then the Christians will quickly get the message that non-Christians are not welcome here, and they certainly won't bring their friends.
It's really helpful that you mentioned the building as one of the first things there. I mean, like my day job is web design. I'm passionate about that, and I think the whole do less better thing works with the specifics of a flyer or a website, but also generally. But yeah, comms is so much more than that. Could you just share a little bit, having been to the Reach conference at Dundonald, could you just share a little bit about how the design and intentionality around the design of that building works as part of that wanting to reach the community around?
Yes, I mean, God has blessed Dundonald with a magnificent building. It's a great gift for reaching the community, isn't it? And some of the strengths of it, of course, are the big open area at the front for the mixing and socialising. The fact there's so much glass on the front of the building, you can see through the sort of social area where we've got a coffee house during the week and into the auditorium. You can see what's happening in the auditorium. And that's partly because, especially if you're a growing church, people think you might be a cult. And so you want to sort of be able for people to see in, there's nothing strange going on. There are no chickens being slaughtered and, it's just church. So I actually chose to chair the finishing team. It was wonderful watching people who are gifted in design and architecture making decisions so affected the look and feel of the building.
And that's so in sync with the reason we called Gourds and Pomegranates was because people with that skill and artistry were appointed to deck out the temple and the tabernacle as well. Yeah,
I think there is a bit of a culture thing there. So one is the culture of the church is outreach, and that depends upon your convictions and therefore whether people are willing to give for the building. And also to make sure that the purpose of the building is to reach the lost, and in particular the next generation. So Dundonald is blessed to have 370 children every Sunday coming into the building. I mean, so it's all about reaching the next generation, because that's the best thing we can contribute to the work of the gospel for the Lord Jesus. And so defining the building for the future was the name of the scheme. So it was just exciting to work with Christian professionals who know what they're doing, and worth spending the fees on all that.
Yeah, for sure.
So the intentionality, I mean, part of it, early on, I wrote a sort of 4-page description of the experience of coming to Dundonald Church in the building in 5 years' time. What was it like? I don't know, but giving that to the architects, some of whom, not Christians and therefore a bit confused. Sorry, are we building a theatre? Are we building a temple? What are we building here? I don't understand. But I think it's mainly, the congregation gave sacrificially. It's amazing what Christians will do for a project that is genuinely about the gospel, but also that has some chance of being effective. And that's where, Christians are not idiots. They get a feel for whether this project is credible.
It's that balance between the faith-filled vision, but also kind of rooted in planning as well. Yeah.
One of the major things that I'm doing in Reach with pastors often is trying to help them clarify the vision for the local church. And a vision is a picture of a future that you're praying and working towards. It's not about extra biblical revelations. It's about what are we trying to do as a church? Because if you don't clarify what that is, people will pull in different directions and you go nowhere. If you lift your eyes and dream into the future and say, look, I don't know what God will do, but wouldn't it be wonderful imagine if our church wasn't 100, imagine if it was 500. Imagine if we had to have 2 congregations and we planted 2 churches in the town. Imagine, I don't know, it's not magic, I don't know, but wouldn't it be wonderful if, and the way to get there is we need a children's worker. We need a children's worker to bring families in, because with families we can grow in number, and that's how we get to reach the whole town. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And you feel the hairs going back up in the back of your head. You sort of think, yeah, that would be wonderful. Yeah. I'd love to see that happen. So anyway, that's how the first step is a children's worker. There's so much to say. There's lots to say about how projects and
but it's so encouraging. Like just talking about church growth and seeing church growth it's the reason that we're doing it.
Well, I have to say, across the country, just about all the people I'm talking to are seeing growth. And some are churches of 50, some are churches of 200. Lots of churches hit ceilings on accepted church structure at about 200. It's where the senior pastor can't know everyone and is just doing a monoculture where he's just got an assistant pastor helping him with his ministry. He's training the church to do his ministry, and you've got no other. So that's where you need to do multiple ministries. So 200 is a barrier. But some are churches of 500. Across the country, I don't know about revival. Glenn's a friend of Reach. He's there with us every year. Great work, Speak Life. I love it. I don't know. It sounds like there is some encouraging, certainly receptivity amongst younger adults and certainly amongst young men. I'm not sure if we can call it revival yet. Let's wait, but and pray that it be so. There are shoots of growth, I think, everywhere, but certainly across the country, all the churches I'm talking to, they're all growing in very ordinary ways, just through faithful preaching and teaching, but also through building teams through which more ministry can be done so that people are brought into the church and saved. And we're also blessed, aren't we, in all the discussions about immigration. Lots of people from other continents are coming looking for Bible teaching churches. There's wonderful growth with fine Bible teaching at the heart. And then, but lots of people from other nations coming in. That's London, but they want Bible teaching.
Yeah.
So there is opportunity. I know the issues are complicated and I'm no expert on them, but we can praise God for the diversity of the congregations that God is bringing to our churches. The Dundonald Morning Congregation is only 46% white English now. And it's a big congregation. What a joy is that?
Just to sort of finish up, that your comments a few minutes ago about vision and thinking about the future. Is there anything specific that excites you about the future of church communications in the context of church growth?
I do think you can't expect your church to back your events and projects and ministries if you don't communicate well with them. And especially if on average most people can only make a Sunday 2 and 4. And by the way, don't assume that because your church is, they come every week that's good. It may be you're not carrying a fringe. In other words, newcomers, the reason why you've got 90% of small groups and 90% of the prayer meeting is you've got no new people. So I'm just saying that's not automatically healthy. But if you have got new people who are only in church every other week, you can't advertise something only once. You've got to think about how you advertise something continually, whether that's through your church bulletin, online midweek, making that effective, with your post-service adverts that you're putting there, thinking practically about the mentions given to things. You don't want to turn church into a sort of business meeting. I mean, it was interesting in Kenya. They do literally spend 20 minutes going through all the events. Thinking through effective communication, putting lots of things on film rather than interview. Interview goes on for 10 minutes and spoils everyone's fed up because it just rambled all over the place. But planning the interview, putting on a little video just from a camera, you can. The cameras are so good now. You can do adverts on film, and I think particularly probably asking younger adults, whether they're in your family or in your church family, how would we do this? The 25-year-olds, the 20-year-olds know everything about this stuff. They all done courses at school. And so I think we've often got resources in the church family or even friends, to say, how would you make a video with 3 minutes? Older people like myself find that a bit worrying. How would you do that? How would it be good quality? And they'll say to you, it doesn't matter. Nobody cares about the quality of it. It just needs to feel live. And it's interesting. I remember talking to Trish Deal at Alpha, and she was saying they learnt early on at HTB that young people don't like to go to things for old people, but old people love to come to things for young people.
That's interesting.
So if you aim everything young, it's amazing how older people will love it. So I think don't control the culture yourself. If you're a sort of 60-year-old pastor, you don't know anything about it. So ask somebody who does. Don't do nothing, but say to the young adult, and often there'll be women in the church who are not leaders or something, but who know how to do this. But they never volunteer because you never ask them. So I do think just noticing you've got people in your church who you haven't asked for help, to help with comms. And of course, a lot of people are doing comms roles in their secular work and can give you some pointers. And basically, you want to say to them, do you know what? This is brilliant. Can I ask you to do it? I'm not going to help you. I just want you to do it. And give them, when they say, what, can I redesign the website for you? Yes, please do. Rather than, well, it has to go through me and I'll write a theological essay on everything. Empower people within your church to do the things that we're not good at, including and especially comms.
Yeah. I think that's a really nice place to end, because God has gifted us with so many people and we're so concerned with trying to do the right thing. But ultimately, we're in ministry together as people. So whether that's as a growing church or a small church, we still to be wise stewards of what God has given us in terms of resources, but also in terms of people. So.
The church is a family, isn't it? It's not a business. And therefore, people get that. People are looking for a real living family. So it doesn't matter too much if it.
Yeah, that's something which is attractive. Yeah. Richard, thank you so much. There's so many nuggets in there. I feel like at any time we could have taken a left turn and gone off on a whole different episode. But thank you so much for sharing.
Well, I'm sorry I talked too much, but I suppose that's the purpose of a podcast, isn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, it's just wonderful to listen and just glean wisdom and knowledge.
Yeah. Can you just tell us where will we find out more about Reach?
Yeah, reachministries.uk. Come to the conference, which is next May. Should be a cracker. We've got Andrew Hurd coming to that to help us with, I think the theme is making disciples in church. We're really excited about the programme for that. And you heard it first here. There'll be a planting stream there as well. So there's lots to look forward to at the conference. But do just look online and see if there's something that could serve you and your church. Have a first chat. Just have a first chat online, which is free. And then, just see if we can help you. We're here to serve the local church in any way we can, so do let us know. And thank you guys for having us on.
No, amazing. Thanks, Richard.
Gourds and Pomegranates is brought to you by Joe Gallant and Hannah Fleming Hill. You can find episode transcripts and contact the show via gppodcast.uk.